Welcome to esports, or as the Zoomers call them, multiplayer games. As anyone who plays online multiplayer games can attest, we will inevitably encounter people who overreact to video games, people who respond with extreme anger, violent threats, and harassment when a video game does not go their way, experiencing various degrees of frustrations when playing a challenging or competitive game is entirely normal, but completely losing control and decision-making to a single emotion, or actively trying to emotionally harm other people is not just harmful to other players, it is harmful to us as well. When we pop on to online forums and subreddits about discussing games, we will frequently find people asking for advice to help them overcome toxic and hostile behavior when playing games. We are smart enough to know when a behavior is not okay, but we may also need a bit of help to overcome these bad habits. So here are my top 5 tips for overcoming the gamer rage. This is the first piece of advice mainly because it is the advice we least want to hear. Whatever game is causing our anger is also, most likely, a game that we enjoy. We have purchased this game, we have invested a lot into this game, we deserve to play this game. This is a reasonable expectation. However, that significant amount of investment sometimes leads us to not taking a broader perspective on how or why we are playing the game in the first place. Anger is an addicting emotion. Elevated adrenaline and dopamine has our nervous system firing on all cylinders. This comes with feelings of being empowered and feeling control. This is why anger feels good. But prolonged feelings of anger will have a negative impact on our physical and mental health. This is because alongside the adrenaline and dopamine response comes an equally high amount of cortisol, the stress hormone. Anger is a very useful emotion for getting out of a bad situation in a very short period of time, but not very helpful if maintained or used frequently. Long-term elevated stress is associated with high blood pressure, heart disease, obesity, diabetes, and much more, even in young people. While repressing our emotions can result in long-term stress, so too do high-stress emotions when we habituate ourselves into responding to mundane things with anger. Gaming is a hobby that we turn to in our free time. We turn to them in times when we get to separate from the daily stressors of work and life in general. The last thing we want to do is habituate our bodies to respond to moments of relaxation with anticipating another episode of high stress. So take some time away from the game to reevaluate why we want to play this game. This could be a month or a couple weeks. Ask ourselves, is the reason I play this game just an excuse to chase the high of being angry? Ask, does this video game deserve my stress? Does this video game deserve my anger? Anger is a precious emotion that should be reserved for only the most important and most immediate problems. If we find the answer to these questions, but we would still like to continue playing our game, then it's time to move on to the second tip. A big part of habituated anger is that we become very reactive people. Rather than taking the time to think about our words and actions, making a plan that achieves our goals, and then acting on that plan, we instead let the anger take control. We do or say whatever knee-jerk response our anger demanded at that moment. Despite how the anger makes us feel, we are not in fact acting as the captain of our own ship. So what we need is an exercise to help us practice acting instead of just reacting. One example of this is to disconnect ourselves from whatever kind of chat the game employs. By removing ourselves from chatting, we remove our ability to react, and thus we have no choice but to think about how we would have acted had we been connected. We can watch other players and think about whether the things they are saying and doing are reactive behaviors motivated by anger. We can also ask ourselves if we have behaved in a similar way. Taking a short time to think about how we want to act before reacting can help us develop real self-control before giving in to anger. If nothing else, disconnecting from chatting with other players can remove us from being a part of angry and toxic interactions. We are more able to keep other people's reactive anger at arm's length and will not subject others to our own anger inadvertently. That too counts as progress to our goal. We want to strive toward being more considerate of other players, both so that we are not barred from playing the game and so that we can have more fun with others. Which leads us to the third tip. Oftentimes when we talk about being anonymous on the internet, we talk mostly about how very bad behavior has zero consequences. We talk about how the anonymity changes the way people treat us, but not as much about how it motivates us to treat other people differently, to treat them like they are not even there. Because other people on the internet are also anonymous, it becomes easy to treat them like they are a whole group of people, a demographic, or as part of the game. It becomes easy to see ourselves as the main character and others as NPCs. To overcome this, we have to go out of our way to remind ourselves that these are the same people we see every day when we walk down the street, shop at a store, or sit down at a restaurant. That every person we talk to is an individual and should be treated as such. One thing that we can do to remind ourselves that we are playing with real people is to introduce ourselves to other players, exactly the same way we would when meeting someone new in real life. What's up, my dudes? My name's Paul, let's have a good match. Even if we do not get a response, it prompts us to treat the game like we are walking into a room of people rather than into the anonymous internet. If we do get a response, it prompts everyone else to do the same. Either way, the multiplayer experience will become more cooperative, friendlier, and perhaps more importantly, your team will perform better, making victory, your competitive advantage, that much more likely. If you can think of some other strategies to remind ourselves of other players' personhood during a game, write them in the comments below. Sometimes the main source of our anger when playing a game is simply that we are too invested in that game to have a healthy reaction when things go wrong. We are completely unable to manage thinking about the game in a new, more healthy way. If this is the case, then it can help to pursue other hobbies. Due in part to the marketing around games by large publishers, many of us feel like we need to define a part of our identities with playing games. From the console wars, to fighting between casual and hardcore gamers, to PCs versus consoles, and so much more, games industry marketing is constantly trying to pit us against other people who enjoy games using arbitrary and unimportant identity politics. But we do not have to define our hobbies with these needless labels invented by salesmen. The best way to add context to our hobby, to really understand how much emotional investment the hobby warrants, is to spend more time with other hobbies. Do we get as angry watching a movie, when drawing or painting? How about when we are running or lifting weights? Are we responding with anger to all of our hobbies, or just video games? And ask ourselves, why? If we cannot think of any hobbies outside of gaming, this might help us explain why we are overly investing our emotions into the hobby. Games are an incredible art form that can accomplish emotional experiences unlike any other art form. However, no piece of art is worth more than a person. No game is worth hurting someone else. Understanding how we respond to our other hobbies can give us insight into whether we are overreacting to a game. One possibility to keep in mind is that our angry reactions to games may not be reducible to a learned behavior that comes up during game time. This video is not a diagnostic tool. I am not a doctor, a therapist, nor a psychologist. But if we have gone through these tips and found that we are still struggling to improve our reactions to games or respond to many hobbies with misplaced anger, we might think about reaching out to a professional to see if our anger is having a negative impact on our health or becoming a chronic condition. This video was about finding ways to get more enjoyment and less anger out of our multiplayer games. I hope you will find those tips helpful. Thank you for watching, subscribe to the channel, consider buying my books, and stay true.